But like one of the things like I wanted to bring up that we didn't really talk about and dive into last time was when we talk about this distinction between Kote versus Kvothe. One of the things we should talk about is that when his parents are killed in 10 chapters or so, and then he goes into the woods after it and is by himself. He talks about like there's 4 doors that your mind uses to escape painful moments. So you got like the doors of sleep, the doors of forgetting, the doors of madness, and the doors of death. So you use all these 4 doors. They're different ways for your mind to kind of escape pain. And so when Kote, his family, is killed, he locks a huge portion of his mind behind the doors of forgetting. Like when he's in Tarbean, he's not thinking about his parents. He's not thinking about what happened to them. He's not thinking about his past at all. He doesn't think about Abinthy and all the lessons he learned from them. He is just purely this wild child acting on instinct, and he's not trying to access his memories. He's just walled them off to the point that even if something reminds him of his family, he immediately pulls back from it and pushes it all back down. So he's locked his mind behind the doors of forgetting after his family gets killed, and it takes Scarpy to wake him up. When Scarpy tells the 2 stories to him, and then Scarpy possibly names him when he says his name, Kvothe, and possibly names him, that is what it takes to wake him up. So moving back to this position he is in now as Kote, it's very similar. It seems like he is pushing down memories anytime, like there's moments where you get flashes of Kvothe, but then as soon as he kind of recognizes that he's being himself again, he pushes that shit back down. So it seems like it's a very similar thing. Maybe not exactly that he's locking himself down behind the doors of forgetting, because he obviously tells his story and he remembers it and he's willing to tell it. So it's not exactly the same thing, but it's a very similar aspect to his time in Tarbean to his time in the bar right now.
So Dan, is there? I'm a little confused about it, and I know we're getting ready to start talking about Alar and Abinthy. Is there any similarities between his forgetfulness and Alar itself? Like, I don't mean his forgetfulness. I mean when he's locking himself behind doors, or that he is, forgetting things. Is there any similarities there? What he's done now, could that be due to him splitting his mind?
That's kind of interesting. So you're basically saying the strength of his Alar would be like the strength to choose to lock away pieces of himself.
Yeah, like can he do it on purpose?
That's interesting. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting way to consider that.
It could be. It could be that he's locked things that make him who he is. He's locked them behind doors through his Alar that he can't access, that he's unwilling to access, to allow himself to access. So yeah. I mean, there's a lot of similarities between his time in Tarbean, but the huge difference is when he's in Tarbean, it doesn't seem like he is able to access his memories. Like they even just like come to the forefront a little bit. He pulls away like putting a hand on a hot stove. And here, like when he's talking to Chronicler, he doesn't want to tell the stories, but it seems like they're still fresh in his mind. Like, I mean, you can see the pain, the anguish on his face is described in this chapter when he's even just thinking about what happened. So it doesn't seem like he's necessarily like completely locked everything behind the doors of forgetting. It seems a little different, that maybe he's, like we talked about, like maybe he locked his name in his chest, his thrice locked chest. Or maybe there's something wrong with his Alar. Maybe like the Seek the Stone thing, he's hiding something from himself. That he just can't access who he is. But there's similarities in the fact that he's not himself, and he's either intentionally or unintentionally preventing himself from being able to become who he is. He's not able to become who he is.
There's definitely pieces because he can't use his sympathy even when he tries. He doesn't sing, and we know when he doesn't have his music throughout the books, it's very detrimental to him. Like he loses a piece of himself. So it's almost like could also be his mind and his own self could be in like what's that called when you're like in deep, when someone's in a coma and they come out of it, their body's in I can't think of the
atrophy.
word. Yeah, it's like his mind and self is like atrophied. And it does seem it's by an event of something he did, but then it also seems to be like he made this choice. He chose the middle in noir, right? So that seems to also have been intentional. So again, it's a really interesting thing to speculate on.
Yeah,
I'll continue on that same point, Tim. It's like the old question: can God create a rock that's too big for him to pick up, right? So in the same way, can his alar be so strong that he cuts himself off enough that he can't bring himself back? You see what I'm saying? Is his alar so strong that he has completely shut, because the pain was so hard, like it was after his family died. And at that point he had been with Ben for a while and learned how to play those games where he, locked himself out of his own mind. So is that, has he done that here? And is that why he can't?
It's interesting too, because it's a way to survive, right? I mean, that's what he does in that state in Tarbeen. And then eventually he needs to get out of it. And this whole thing started with what Dan was saying, is that he needed Scarpy to wake him up. So hopefully, and maybe what we're seeing now, and we talked about this on the last episode, maybe that's what Chronicler is. Maybe that's what he's there for. He's there to have Kvothe tell his own story to shake himself out of it, to possibly wake himself up, which is clearly what Bast is trying to have happen as well. Because he's trying to get him, shaken out of this as well. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of different parts to it because as Dan said too, he could be playing Seek the Stone to a degree, right? And that's kind of what you're talking about, is maybe he's done this to himself and he doesn't even remember he did it to himself, or he doesn't know his own way out, right? I think there is something definitely to the box as well. There's a lot of these questions, these enigmatic sort of puzzles that are left for us to try to disentangle and figure out.
Yeah, and you have like a Loden when he panics when Kvothe asks him the question about like, what would you say about someone who constantly changes their name? And Loden panics over that. And so I think that is probably put in there because that explains that Kvothe changing his name to Kote is not just simply taking on a different calling name. That he changed his name. Like in the story, names are obviously way more. Naming is way more powerful than just calling names. I don't think he just changed his calling name. I think he changed his name. If that makes sense.
No, that's interesting because within this set of chapters, we're starting to get that groundwork laid of the importance of names. It's mentioned, it's like sort of peppered in and layered pretty subtly initially, but it's that repetition. Once you read Rothfuss enough, you start to realize the repetition itself is about as heavy-handed as it's going to get a lot of times with some of these things. And he does mention it quite a bit in this set of 3-4 chapters, where he's saying things like just things about naming. We'll get to it, but yeah, there's definitely something to that. That's insinuated for sure.
Yeah, it's extremely obviously one of the most confusing aspects of the book when you go through your first read is his time in Tarbeen, his time in the bar, because he does not seem like himself at all in either of those situations. It's very confusing until you start looking at it and you step back and you're like, shit, maybe it's not just he wasn't able to deal with trauma for 3 years. Maybe it's that there was something preventing him from accessing who he was and being himself for 3 years in Tarbean. And maybe there's something that is preventing him from being able to open his box, to be able to use sympathy, or to be able to use the ADIM skills that he learned. Once you start realizing, like, the shit that happened to him in Tarbean, that wasn't just trauma, that there was something else going on, then it starts to make more sense about what's going on in these early chapters with him as Kote. And then, every time we go back into the frame and all the interludes, and when he can't use his sympathy and stuff, it makes more sense when you pair it with what happened to him in Tarbean.
And when you say that, you mean that it's not just trauma. You're saying that, whether it be because of the trauma or added to the trauma, was he's behind the doors of forgetfulness.
Yes.
I'm just trying to...
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Trauma delivered him into, right? Delivered him behind the doors, or sent him behind the doors.
But when you compare it to like our world, though, like, if someone has a traumatic experience, they might push some memories down, but like, it's different though. This is like, he doesn't have access to his magical abilities, so it's different in this world because there is magic involved, and so it would be more. It's clearly more powerful than just, I don't remember. Like, he doesn't have access to any of his abilities, even if he wants them.
And it's to further your point, it's his abilities are. Some of his abilities are innate. We learn that obviously throughout the rest of the story when certain things happen. But when you can tell he has no control over these things, but all of a sudden he breaks that bottle a little bit later in this chapter. And I don't think he does that on purpose, because there's a lot of things that if he can do that, there are, a lot of times where he should be, messing people up or snapping out of it, so to speak. And you see it, as his anger flares, or, as he gets passionate about something, like we said last chapter when he's singing, his hair lights on fire and his eyes glow, and that may be an exaggeration, but that's portrayed anyway.
Yeah, it seems like he wants to access his abilities and he can't, and it frustrates him. So it's not just trauma. The shit that's going on with him as Kote, it's not just trauma. Like, he wants to be able to open that box. He wants to be able to set that guy on fire. He wants to be able to use his ADIM fighting skills, but he can't. So it's more than just trauma. It's a part of this world. There is aspects of this world, and naming and Alar, and hiding things behind boxes and that kind of stuff. There's something to all of that.
It's pretty great. Because it does kind of connect to our world in the sense that when people do go through trauma, they do shut themselves off, and some of their innate abilities do become muted. So there seems to be some type of psychological, Rothfuss is tapping into very human traits throughout. It's great. I mean, obviously it's further emphasized by the fact that he has magical powers, and those are muted, and he has all these acquired abilities over time, and we know so well, through rereads, we know so well what he's capable of, and the fact that those powers and those abilities are muted is saying a tremendous amount. It's saying a lot, right? So, but it's great because what he does give us through Tarbean, and what he gives us here and with those doors, you start to realize there is that interconnectedness, and we clearly have to speculate of what has happened that's put him in this place.
Well, and I'll further what you said again, Tim. That those innate feelings or abilities that get muted when you go through a trauma. Anybody who's been through a trauma, it's something. There are things that you wish you could just get over or forget about, or and again, sometimes you do forget about those things without any trying. Your mind locks those memories away on purpose, and I'm talking about real life trauma. It's true to life is what I'm getting at. It's as far as abilities go, I don't know. Maybe there could be some example that would work out there, but what I'm saying is there are literally, you lock things away behind the doors of remembering, and I think you said madness is one. Absolutely, those things happen in real life trauma.
Rothfuss spells it out for you that things are different, but he does it very subtly, where he's like, Coach shook his head. It was a long time ago. Not even 2 years, chronicler protested, and I am not what I was, Kote continued without pausing. What was that exactly? Kvothe, he said, simply refusing to be drawn in any further into an explanation. Now I am Kote. I tend my inn. That means beer is 3 shims and a private room costs copper. And he's like, as you said, done is done. The stories will take care of themselves. But you get that I am not who I was. The first time you go through that, you don't take that literally. But I think, when you go through the second time and you kind of understand that there is something different, it's literally, he is not who he was. Because he can't even do the things that he wants to do. When he wants to set the dude on, the skin dancer on fire, he's not able to use his sympathy. When he wants to use his ADM fighting skills, he's not able to do it. So he is literally not who he was, not just figurative.